Hello, my name is Paul Schlitto, and in this video I'm going to show you how to replace the encoders on an Arturia Origin synthesizer, desktop modular synthesizer. Now, if you're an owner of one of these, or a potential owner, or you've read any of the forum notes and things that go on Arturia's forum site posts, then you'll know that people have had a lot of problems with the encoders. Mine started playing up probably around about 6 months after I've had it. I've had this machine probably around about 5, maybe 6 years now. For 4 years it sat in a corner doing nothing because the jog wheel encoder, which is normally here, I've taken it out at the moment, was such a pain in the backside. It made the thing just very difficult to use. And I noticed when I came back and checked the thing again when I wanted to use it last week, that I got this encoder was starting to fail, this encoder, and this encoder. There are 33 encoders on here, and effectively all the potentiometers are marked with the markings around the edge, and they'll only turn from there through to there. The encoders turn continuously, so that's the difference between them. But effectively the encoders are the jog wheel, the universal controls down the side here, the oscillator waveform type, select on filter and oscillator and LFO, and also select on the envelope, and then all the encoders down here, which there are 17 of them, is for the sequencer. So these are all encoders, encoder, encoders, 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 encoder. 33 encoders altogether on this board. Now, the problem that you get with these encoders is when they start going, that instead of being nice and smooth and sweeping through the data ranges, in fact the little ident which sort of sweeps around and shows you where the knob is actually pointing, it doesn't go like that, it goes like this. And quite often the jog wheel on mine, it would go one step up, one step down, one step up, one step down, but mostly it would then sort of try to go down. Even when I was turning up, it would still try to sort of jitter down. Basically the jog wheel became completely useless. These ones are starting to go. They're having a similar sort of effect. They're not as bad, but instead of sweeping smoothly, it's starting to go sort of there, and then it will do this, and you can see this sort of effect as it's sort of going past. It's becoming a problem. So rather than just changing 1, 2, 3, 4 knobs, I'm going to change all of the encoders, all 33 of them. That way, they're not going to then cause a problem in the future. I think the problem is caused, I know the problem is caused by these encoders being cheap. They are not very good quality encoders. Now, for whatever reason, I think that they were originally designed to use these. These are the Bournes encoders. This is the Bourne, an American encoder. This is a Chinese copy. It's cheaper. And obviously the boards for this machine were made in China, so I think obviously the manufacturer said, tell you what, we'll use these encoders, we can get all the other parts, instead of buying in the American ones here, we'll put these ones in, they're just as good a quality. And Arturia said, yeah, fine, no problem. The problem is they're not, and it's not until they've been in use for a while do you notice the difference. These have a life of, they reckon, 30,000 rotations, greater than 30,000 rotations. So it should be a minimum 30,000 rotations for this Chinese one to work. The American Bourne one has on its data sheet a rotational life of in excess of 100,000 rotations. So this technically has a life 3 times longer than this. Now, this machine has had not a lot of use. This, obviously, the jog wheel gets a lot more use, so that's the first one to fail, and this is the jog wheel one. These ones here and the sequencer buttons have never been touched hardly, but this is starting to fail, this is starting to go. These buttons here, again, don't get a huge amount of use, but that one is going funny and that one is going. I think that if you don't use these things, after a while, they oxidize the contacts and they become a problem. And obviously if they're used a lot, they wear out and they become a big issue. Again, it might be dirt inside there, it might be the lubricant which is oxidizing and causing a contact issue or whatever. But basically these things are not as reliable as they should be, and they are a problem. And I think they're also fitted into Waldorf machines and several other manufacturers as well, because they seem to have similar issues. And this one is the one you replace it with. The cost of doing this is surprisingly low. The Bournes Encoders work out at around about $1 each. That's it, $1. So all 33 of these things cost $33 to replace the lot. This is a £2,000 machine, a $3,000 machine effectively. And the encoders are $1 each. That's all they are. These ones probably cost half that price. But of course you then get cheaper encoders, crap quality. Now, if we zoom in on these encoders, we can see a little bit more detail what they actually are. There's 4 types of encoders used in these. There are ones with switches and detents. That's the knobbly bit that you turn. So if I turn that, you might be able to hear it. That's the detent. So as it turns, you can feel its sort of knobbliness. And that's got a switch. That's the jog wheel. So there we are. And you can tell this one because it's got 3 contacts at the bottom here, 3 pins at the bottom here, if you get that right. And then 2 at the top. The 2 at the top of the switch and the 3 of the encoder. So again, here's our Bournes version. There's the 2, get it that way. There's the 2 at the top and 3 at the bottom. And then these 2 lugs at the side is what hold the thing in to the actual board. They're extra support. So now, as we're saying, there's 4 of these different types used. There's ones with switch and detent, ones with no switch and detent, then there is no detent, a switch, and then no detent and no switch. And I got these from DigiKey, so this is where they come from. This is one of the encoders. This is the one with a switch and the detent, and you can see the number here. This number here, the PE16, I'll get it right in there, PE16 4220, and then the S24. When you check on the data sheet, if you pick up the data sheet, you put this number in to Google and it will give you the data sheet, and you'll see there are different types of these. The ones you want are this number here. This first 2 indicates the number of detents. If it's 1, it means there's 12 detents. If it's 2, there's 24 detents. We need a 24 detent one. If it's 0, there are no detents, and it's just smooth rotation. And then the S here, the S stands for switch. If there's S on there, it's got a switch. If there's N, there's no switch. So this one is a 2 and an S, so it's a 24 detents and a switch. And then you'll get variations, and there's the 4 variations. So there'll be a 0 and an S, a 0 and an N, a 2 and an S, a 2 and an N. And those are the different types of things. I'll put these in the link underneath so you'll see all these, and also a link to the original post where we got the guy got them from, although he had made a mistake on one of the links. But I'll give you the numbers and the details of these encoders you actually need to actually get to do this job. So now I'll take this apart. I've actually taken all the knobs off of these. I've had this apart, and I just put it back just to show you what it actually looked like. At the top, obviously, you should know, but then we can then quickly just take this apart without having to take out a million screws and bits and pieces, because there's quite a lot of screws holding this together, and it'll be quicker. So now I'll go into that part there. So now, before we start taking this apart, tools you will need are soldering iron, fine tip soldering iron. This is a temperature controlled Weller soldering iron that I'm using here. I'm using a larger soldering iron. This is a Weller Expert, but it's a soldering gun. But it's 100 watt, and it heats up quickly, but it's got enough heat in here to actually undo those lugs, or get the solder melted on those lugs. To get rid of the solder, I'm using a solder sucker. Some people like to use solder braid. I use solder sucker. Personal choice. Pair of pliers to undo the nuts on the actual pot. I did have a nut runner, which is a special sort of device which goes over a nut and undoes them, but I can't find it anywhere. And then obviously a Phillips screwdriver, which you'll need to undo the screws. To take this apart, you'll need to take off the top and the bottom, which are just held on. In fact, this little bit here, that goes on the bottom part. There's just 2 screws to take that off. And then underneath here, you will see there's 2 screws there. Take those out there. And then underneath, on the other side, we've got 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, there. Take those off. You don't need to take the sides off or anything like that. And then this whole top will come off. And you just lift it off like that. Now, lift it to the back like that. And you'll see, if I pull this back here, in fact I'll zoom out a little bit more, you can then see the whole thing. 2 boards in here. There's a main CPU board here, and then there is also the front panel board here, and there are 4 connectors. There are 2 big ribbon connectors here. One goes to the actual LCD panel here, and it is actually marked on here, and it says board LCD. So if you look there, that's the LCD one. And then we've got another one here which is marked as front, and this one goes to the front. And in fact, if we turn it round, you can see here's the connector there. Now these connectors just pull off. Just be careful when you're pulling it, just pull it off like that and it's away. This one here, again, pull off. And remember, the line down the edge of these, the red line is pin 1, so you have to remember they go on to pin 1, but you'll probably find that these are twisted in such a way so they'll fit back on again. Now we've got those removed, we've now just got this panel here. This wire here goes over to here, and there's a little control surface here which is hidden behind this panel. If you just pull that wire off there, that comes off there. And then here, there is another wire. Just zoom in here a little bit, and you can see this, what we've got here. Pull it in a bit more. This is the LCD panel, and this is fixed onto the back of this board. Now, this other wire here, you can just see it coming off. Pull that one off there. I've already pulled it off, so it's already out of the way. That's it. This wire is now out of the way, so we are now completely free. And I'll zoom back out again, zooming in and out and in and out, so we can get. Now we can move this out of the way. I'll just put that down there. And this is the board we're going to be working on. This is the actual panel. Now, there is another, to take this apart, we've got probably around about 15-20 screws, which you'll see sort of dotted around here, and this holds this board to the front panel here. When you take this front panel off, you'll also find that the LCD underneath there is attached to this board here by this cable. Now, I'll show you if I zoom right in, providing I can maintain focus, we can see, here we are, this little board here. Now this connector is very small, and there's a little black bit running along there. This pushes down and it holds this cable down. So what you do is you just get your finger out and just flip it up. See, it just pops up and just pushes down and it holds it in place. So all you need to do is just flip it up like that, and then this will pop out like that. Now, this is a bitch to get back on again, to get this back under through this hole here. So I saw on another post that someone said use a piece of paper with a sticky tape on there, and what you do is you stick that to this, and then when you're threading it through the board, you can then pull this through the board and it will go on. Now there's another cable here to take out, this one here, it's a little power cable to the LCD. That's for the backlight probably. So take that out there. And now we just got to take off the screws. I've already done this once, so there are not many screws to do. The first time you are doing this, you will find there are a million screws. Now someone will say you're not using an earthing strap. No, I'm not, because I haven't got one. But the trick here is if you touch and hold the metal part here, you will ground yourself. If you've got a piece of metal, your soldering iron, this is grounded, so if it's off, make sure it's off. touch that and then touch this, you'll ground yourself then. So, and providing you're not shuffling your feet around on a nylon carpet, you shouldn't generate any static. I've done this thousands of times on computers and never had a problem. And so that's the way I do it. Normally people will use an earthing strap, but we're not dealing with components that are individual. This is on a board, they're already mounted in there, so that's much less of an issue. Right there, we've got that one. I'll just put another one in here. Another one here. Now, you've got to watch, because if you've got the joystick underneath which is pushing through, so it won't lay flat. And I think there is, that's it. Now, you notice that drop down, and that cable there has gone through the hole. This one here just needs to twist and drop through. And there we are, we're now out. That is the front panel. There. I found a washer in there which had fallen off. That's your front panel. There it is. You can now remove it out the way. And remember to attach the little piece of paper to this, to thread this through and get it back onto the board when we're reassembling it. That goes down there now, out of the way. Here is our board. That's the front. This is the next bit we're going to work on. Now, here we have got this faceplate which they've put on. And this is where you need your pliers, because you need to undo the nuts on these here. Now, I've only put some of these on again because I've already taken the thing off once. So I didn't need to undo. You didn't watch me for half an hour whilst I undo all these things. This is probably the most time-consuming part of the whole lot, is undoing the screws and undoing the nuts on these. And then obviously taking off the pots themselves. So I'll have to edit this video down, otherwise you will be bored as hell watching me do this. Again, if Arturia would actually get their service department working properly, people could send it in and this would not be an issue. But I'm afraid their customer service seems to be much less robust than their sales department. They keep bringing out new products, but the support you get on the older one seems to be much, what's the best word for it? Much to be desired. Yes. Right, so there we are. Now this should lift off now. Yep, there we are. This panel comes off. Again, this can go back down here, out of the way. And here we are. Now we can see the board itself. We've got a DSP processor there. You don't need to bother about the board on the back. Taking that off, that doesn't need to come off. Here's your encoders. Encoder there, there. You can see the blue ones, if we get this in position. There's encoders there. That's where the jog wheel was, which I've taken out. Blue encoders, and you'll find that these little washers on here, there's washers which sit on here before or after you take this panel off. There's washers underneath. So when you tip the thing up, you'll find a whole load of washers fall off. So you've just got to pick these washers off and then put them into a bag out of the way. Otherwise, they will get in the way and they will fall onto things afterwards. So that's just something to watch for. So now we've got this apart, we can actually start taking these off and then replacing them one by one, or you could just take them all out in one go and replace them in one go, however you want to do it. Here's our new Bournes unit, which is going to go into here. So we zoom into this. Here's our new unit here, and that's going to be the hardest bit, is getting these things back in again, because sometimes there's a bit of solder left over, but there we are, we finally got it in. And then it just needs soldering up on here. That needs soldering up there, and that is effectively in like so. I'll solder that up, and then we'll start working through all of these. excuse me, I'm trying to look at this and also operate the camera at the same time, and obviously one is overriding the other. So now I'm going to start doing this. Now it's probably not worth me filming the entire thing while you're doing this, so I'll do this and then we'll come back after we've done this and then start putting the thing back together again. Now I've just put the jog dial back in again. I just want to found something I've just seen on here. I said there were 4 types of encoders, and in fact they are actually marked with different types of encoder on here. If we zoom in on this carefully and we look, you'll see this number at the side here. It says showing 1 there. It says 1. There's a 1 there and a 1 there. And in fact, on all of these, next to the encoder, where is it? This encoder here says 2. So this means there's 4 types of encoder. This is type 2. These are type 1. Pull out. So we got type 1's there, type 1, type 3, type 2 again, and then type 4. So they are actually marked on here. So if you get your encoders ready and you know which ones are going to go in there, you can make sure that you get the right ones in there because they're type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. That's type 2 over there. So that's just something extra I've just seen there on the board, so that if you're actually doing this. Okay, I'm back. It's like 2-3 days later because things didn't go quite according to plan, as these things do. The biggest problem, I've actually put the whole thing, I've done the job, replaced all the encoders and put it all back together again, and I've also screwed on the top because this takes around about half an hour putting all these things back on here again. So the biggest problem I can report is really the soldering that's required to get or unsoldering to get the encoders out. And it's not the pins on these things, it's the lugs. If we zoom in, these lugs on here are effectively a push fit. So when they go in, they're quite tight. And you notice what I did the other day, and I was pushing the jog wheel in. It was quite a tight fit. You've got to make sure that either you push these in a little tiny bit. It says moving it that way. You bend them in a little tiny bit, or you make sure that the holes that are left behind when you've unsoldered this are very clean and there's no solder sort of blocking the edge, because they don't fit in the middle part, they fit in the edge part. So if we zoom in here, you can see, I'll keep focus on that. You can see where I soldered them in, and I haven't filled the holes with solder. I've soldered to the edge. That's all it needs, really. It doesn't need to be filled completely. But when they fill in, it's the edge they stick to. And when you're unsoldering these, if you unsolder the pins first, and there's obviously rubber pins there, get rid of the solder off of these, then solder sucker for these, and then you're going to have to use a screwdriver underneath, heat this up, because there'll still be solder around the edge here. Heat them up and then prise them down gradually, and they'll pull out the other side, and then do the other one on the other side, and then just wiggle the thing off. The biggest problem I had basically was with my solder sucker. The solder sucker which I was using, this one here, is not as good as it should be. Basically, it gave up the ghost. I used to have one, which is a really good one, around about 20 years ago. And the hole on it was very small at the end. This one here kept blocking up, so I had to go and buy a new one, which is the reason why it's taken a couple of days extra. This is a replacement, and I can't seem to find any of like that I used to use. These I hunted around, and they're all the same. They're all this one here, certainly in the UK. They're all very similar, and they're all this model. And the problem is the hole in this, again, if we look closely, the hole in that is actually quite large. So when you're desoldering the pins on these things, the vacuum isn't concentrated over the pin so much. So therefore it struggles to suck the solder out. On the lugs it's not so bad because it's quite large. But on the pins, the small pins, it can be a little bit more of a problem. And I had to actually solder them up initially and then suck the solder out of them again, because it just couldn't really suck the things out with the solder that was already there. So you had to effectively go around, resolder them all, and then suck the solder off, and it worked okay. But I say the biggest problem is wiggling these things out, and it took about 3 hours to take these all out and then replace them with the new ones. There was one complication, and it was a cock-up on my part, and I'll show you, because this can happen quite easily. I didn't use the big solder gun, which, well, I did for a bit, but then I stopped using it because it just wasn't working well. I still couldn't get enough heat in there. And in the process, I actually damaged one of the components on here. And again, if we zoom in, you'll see here, there are a couple of extra components that have now arrived on this board. I can keep that in focus there. If you look at this here, these are surface mount capacitors. This is an RC network which is required to work with these encoders and basically keep it stable so it doesn't jitter the output. I managed to break off one of these, and it broke off there. So I put all the encoders back on again, turned the thing on, checked it, and in the sequencer number 8, it was only going up. It wasn't going down. So when I looked closely, I noticed that I'd actually broken one of the capacitors off. So I had to then find a couple of capacitors, because it's a 0.1 microfarad capacitor, and I hadn't got one, so I had to make up a 0.1 out of 2 other capacitors, 0.3, a 39 NF and a 68 NF, and basically make up a 100 NF capacitor to go across there. Put that on, works fine. So it's not insurmountable, but that is something you've got to be careful of. When you're trying to get these components out here, because they are quite large lugs, and it is close to that, and it was close to that, but where I actually damaged that, you can see they're very close, and that was initially the problem I had there. So really, otherwise, apart from that, and the time just taking these out. I know the guys at Arturia say they need to have it back because of specialist tools. Basically, you don't really require anything more than normal electronic removal component tools. It's not surface mount, so that's not an issue. And I say you've just got to be careful when you're taking these out. You're going to end up having to prise the encoders out, because you can't get rid of the solder around the edges where they meet up against the edge of the board. You're going to, even if you heat up and push the pin in, it's hard because these lugs are very solid and they don't want to move easy. And it's probably just easier just to, I say, use a screwdriver underneath and just prise the things off. Make sure you're heating up the lug at the same time, so it will come out. Otherwise, you just end up breaking either the encoder or the board. So otherwise, that's pretty much it. I did actually take this board off in the end. It's just 4 screws. It just sat more level than when I was actually messing around with it. And I didn't want this thing flapping around. So this did actually just come off. So that was it. We've put it all back together again. We've put the top back on. All the screws are on. I've put the washers on underneath each one. There is a slight difference in height between... Here's a new encoder and here's an old encoder, and there is a slight difference in the height at which these sit. The new encoders seem to sit slightly higher, and if you're looking along and you're comparing them, they do sit. It doesn't affect it when it's all on here, but if you're looking sort of down along the actual board and you've got an old encoder and a new one in side by side, you'll notice the new one seems to sit a little tiny bit higher, but it doesn't actually affect the operation of it. What I did was I just did all the different types together. So I did type 2 in one go, I did the type 3s in one go, and then the type 4s in one go, and then the type 1s in one go. So then I kept all these things together. As you can see, I've got a pile here, another pile here, and then a big pile at the side here. Those are all the sequencer encoder knobs. So it's all done. Now then, going back together again, I did actually discover that I don't necessarily need a little piece of paper to get that wire through. The fiddliest bit about this is getting this back in again. And to get this to sort of do this, it's a bit of a pain. Because what you've got to do is you've got to lay this on top, and you've got to, first of all, Yep, that's the way round. The joystick goes through the hole. That lays down on there like that. Now what you will find is that, first of all, you need this little cable under here to come up. And there's also the second one, which you have to sort of get your hand in under here. He says, trying to hold it on. And then thread it through the side. If you've got big hands, it's a bit of a problem. But now, we were talking about the that other ribbon cable and using a piece of paper on there. I actually found that when it's actually in there, you can't see it, and I can't get the camera angle, but you can see the cable under there. And what you can do is I use a drill bit. I'll have to zoom back in again. And if you look carefully, you can see the cable. What you can do is you can just edge the cable up and just pop it up like that. And it's up. And then you can just drop it back in again, so that's not really an issue. Biggest problem you're going to have now is getting these in and finding that the buttons will be sort of sitting in the way. They don't sit flush. You've got to go round and sort of wiggle each one so it goes into position. So whilst it's flat on the board here, in fact, I found the easiest way to do this, and I'm not going to be even in camera shot here, is to actually rest the thing on the edge of the table like this, and then work on it, and then drop the thing through. Because you don't want anything sitting underneath. And effectively what I'm doing is I'm leaning back against the edge of the table. You can just about see this. And then you've got to sort of wiggle these around, and you'll find that they start to drop into place. You need to hold the thing down, so you want to get a screw in the corner, for example, to start to hold it down. You don't need to tighten it down all the way. And then just come back to here, and then you're going to have to sort of look, and you'll find that the buttons sort of tend to sort of not quite fit the hole. So as you're going around, you will get one corner done, and this is the fiddly arse bit, because when you move it, you'll find that the buttons drop out again. So you've then got to sort of go to the other corner and do there to hold it on, and then go round, and you'll just find, see the buttons sticking, and you can hear them popping into place as I'm sort of wiggling it around. Then go to the top of the board, or the other side, and then do the same. Just one screw in, just enough to hold it in, so it will hold the board down, but not so far down that you can't sort of wiggle the buttons a bit. And I'll do the other side as well. Just there. Now, the board should be held in, and we can see, ow, it's been stabbed by a pin, what's happening. And if you look carefully, zoom in again. The buttons are not sitting exactly flush here, you see that? Well, if you just push them down, because the board is not held firmly down, you can sort of wiggle the buttons, and you'll find that they start to then come into place. And you'll find you've probably got to do a lot of them. Where else are they? There's one there, which is the enter button, which is just sticking a bit. There we are. And that one, out, stabbed myself with a pin on the back. And as you run over them, you can hear them sort of clicking then, so you know they're in place. Once that's there like that, then you can start tighten the screws up a bit more, hold it down. It says, keep forgetting to do that bit there. Excuse me. And 4 screws in, and then 1 in the middle, because the middle part will sort of hang down a little bit. And then we should have all the buttons flush. They're all up. Oh, a couple there. They're all there. Drop that back into there and there. Some of these little plastic things which are over the LEDs sometimes pop up whilst you're doing this, so they just push back down again, so it's not really a problem. There, 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 there. There, 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 there. We're in, we're all in. So effectively all the screws you just need to be screwed back in again. All the buttons are flush, they're all working, they're all clicking, none of them are caught under the panel. So effectively we now got that back. Now we can go back and put this cable back in. And as we remember before, we put this in. The little lever sits up. If I can get in close enough and hopefully try and get the focus on it. This goes back, it drops in. My finger is in the way here, so it's a bit awkward. Better still if I put my glasses on. This just drops in, and you'll find that it sort of sits in and it slides in slightly. It doesn't go in much, only goes in probably around about a millimetre, something like that. And then the little black bit just clips down and drops down on top of it like that. And then it'll just hold it in place. And that's that one done there. This one here goes around and drops into there. And then that one just goes in. You should actually put it in the right way around, it would help. There we go. That goes in the right way around there. And that's pretty much it. So now the rest of it is a case of just putting the screws back in and then putting it back on. And then we should be ready to go. So I'll stop here now and we'll return when we've done that. So we have the board back in. This is all back together again now. All the screws are back in. So now effectively we can put this back onto here. And it's really just a case of reversing the process. The black wire here goes over to this little point here. It looks like a calibration point because there's a couple of pots here and you could adjust them from the outside, but only after you take the side panel off. So that might be a calibration point for something there. So we're just going to get this right way around on here, and then that clips in there. This cable here goes into the power or the controller for the LCD. There, looks like the backlight controller there. And then we've got the 2 main cables. We've got the front panel here, which is marked front. And again, pin 1 goes to pin 1 on here, is marked as pin 1. If you look carefully on there, it is marked as pin 1. And you've got the red line down the edge of your cable, which is marked there. Get my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. And then, case of putting that. It's just a little bit awkward just to get it in there, but once it's in, just push it in with your fingers and that's it, job done. And then we've got the board LCD, which again, pin 1 is angled, pin 1 on here, and that just goes onto there like that. So we've got that cable, that cable, that cable, that cable. It's ready to go back together again. So just fold that back there, push this up here, lift it round, and tuck that in there, and the thing will drop round and then down, and that's the lid back on again. Zoom in. I have got my power supply here, so plug in and fire on. Lights lighting up. See, the LEDs are lighting up. The LCD takes a little time to just sort of fire up. There we are. Origin. It's upside down. And now, actually, I can put the big jog wheel back on again. That's the one that caused all the problems in the first place. Switch is working, and then we can wait for it to fire up. It takes a few seconds for this to actually sort of start up, but we're going to get there. And right, we're almost there now. See, we've got the origin part, and there it is. Right, now then, moment of truth. Let's zoom in. Now then, program. Look at this. It actually goes up and down. Try preset. Preset, there we are. All the way down. And up again, and it doesn't go. This is what it was doing before. Literally, it would do that. That's all it would do. It was damn useless. And there we are, all the way up, all the way down. Select a preset. We've got a preset in there, have a preset there, and that's it. As for the pots turning here, you can see, you can just about see that turning all the way around, there to there, there to there. This was one of the dodgy ones, as was this one here. So if we just click on that, if we go to program, light up, and then we go down that one there, change colour. And there we are, we can see it scanning around. Yay, it works. And there's a sequence one. That was sequence 8, which was dodgy. There we are. And the other one's working. There we are. So we have all 33 encoders replaced. Now it's just a case of sticking the knobs back on, and our Arturia Origin is now back working once more. It's a great synth. It can do some fantastic emulations, and Hermit Nerd, who's on the forum, has done some absolutely brilliant ones with Vangelis, Jean-Michel Jarre, Depeche Mode. He's done a fantastic GX1 emulation. And it just goes to show, when you take the time to actually work with this synth, it can produce some really great results. A lot of people seem to diss it, and they say, oh, it's just a collection of VSTs in a box. It's not, because, okay, you've got the VST for maybe a CS80 and the Jupiter 8 and the Moog. It's when you start using it as a digital modular. In other words, you don't necessarily use the preset. You start making up your own thing. That's when it comes to life. And that's really what it is. It is a digital modular. And I think Arturia probably sort of slightly missold it. And people think it's a box of JV80, Jupiter 80, Jupiter 8, CS80 and other things, sort of patches. But it's actually much more than that. It is a pretty damn good machine. And I must admit, I had used it a lot on other stuff. And when I was listening back to my old stuff, I suddenly realised just how good it sounded. So it'll be glad to get back into it again. So that's it. it's back up and running again. I'm actually going to do a next video is taking a beat step apart, because the connector, the USB connector on my Beat Step Pro fell off. It's a tiny little crappy thing, and I wanted to do a video on that, of just how I've hardwired it together. So that's going to be the next one. So from me, I'll just put the knobs back on here again. It'll be running in, and I hope you found this interesting and useful. And if you want to comment on it, stick a comment in the comments below, and I'll try and answer as much as I can. And I hope you found it useful. So from now, or from me, my name's Paul Schlitto. I'll be off.